Shalom, friends, and welcome to Walking the Ancient Path, where we journey back into the language, landscape, and life rhythms of the Scriptures in a lighter, more accessible way, exploring the world of the Bible as its original listeners would have experienced it. I'm your host, Sully, joined by our trusted companions, Decan, our scholar of ancient Hebrew thought, and Hope, a storyteller who seems to walk right out of the hills of Judea.
The first epistle Paul wrote was 1 Thessalonians. Scholars generally believe it was written around 51 CE. This makes it the earliest surviving Christian literature.
Today, we'll continue our walk through the entire book of 1 Thessalonians, picking up at the beginning of chapter 2, verse by verse, unpacking each passage in organic ancient Hebrew thought.
In the Textus Receptus, this second chapter serves as a field journal. The messengers remind the Thessalonian community that their arrival was purposeful, like a vessel full of meaning. Though wounded by Philippi's rods, they still raised their voices like trumpet blasts on a battlefield. They emphasized that their words carried no deceit but were tested like metal in Yahweh's fire. They came not driven by greed, but with gentleness, like a mother feeding her child, and with firmness, like a father training his sons. They worked with their hands so as not to burden the community, walking blameless under Yahweh's watch. They recall how the assembly received their message not as human words, but as Yahweh's breath. They compare the Thessalonians to suffering flocks in Judea, enduring wounds from their own tribes. They warn of wrath heaped high upon those who hinder the nations from hearing. They confess their tearful separation, their longing gazes, and their efforts to return, yet obstacles placed by the adversary. Finally, they reveal that their crown of glory is not gold, but the Thessalonians themselves, faces they will lift before the Master when he appears.
Here's how we'll format it so it's like a living Hebrew commentary.
First, I'll quote the verse, direct text from the Textus Receptus in English for referencing.
Second, I'll give an ancient Hebrew imagery rendering, retelling in concrete Hebrew thought patterns and symbols.
Last, I'll follow up with imagery notes, giving background on the cultural and/or language imagery.
So let's start our informal, informational, clearing the murky into clear water walk.
Verse 1, literally from the Textus Receptus in English for referencing. For you yourselves know, brothers, that our entrance to you was not empty.
Ancient Hebrew imagery rendering. Brothers of the clan, you know well, when we crossed your threshold, our coming was not hollow like a jar without grain, but weighty, carrying substance into your midst.
Imagery notes. We discovered entrance in the first chapter in verse 9 in Greek thought is more than a doorway. It is the path of arrival and the way of coming in, a visitation. In Hebrew thought, it is a trail through the thicket into the camp and the gate, an open threshold of welcome. It's more than just stepping through a gate or tent flap. It reinforces the Hebrew way of seeing relationships as shared space under the tent rather than abstract visitation. Not empty, which is often translated in different Bible versions as not in vain. The Greek word kene means empty, hollow, void, fruitless. In Hebrew thought, it's visual and tactile. A desert without spring, a lamp without oil, a stomach with no bread. This contrast paints Paul's visit as weight-bearing and life-bringing, not a show of hollow words, so when we read not in vain, think not a hollow echo but a heavy, full jar placed in the camp.
Verse 2, but having suffered before and been shamefully treated in Philippi, as you know, we spoke boldly to you in our God, with much struggle to proclaim the good news of God.
Even after our bodies bore stripes and our honor was dragged in the dust at Philippi, we still raised our voices in your midst with the strength of our Elohim, pushing forward like oxen straining against a yoke, to herald the covenant word of Yahweh amid heavy resistance. Hey guys, what stripes and dishonor at Philippi is Paul talking about here? What happened to them there?
Yeah, excellent question. Let's take that side trail. Paul and Silas are not just speaking poetically here. They are pointing directly back to a specific event, the Philippi beating and imprisonment written about in Acts 16 verses 19 to 40.
Philippi was a Roman colony, a mini-Rome, settled by retired soldiers. It had a strong commitment to Roman law and Roman honor codes. Paul cast a spirit of divination out of a slave girl. Her owner's lost prophet accused Paul and Silas of disturbing the city and dragged them before the magistrates.
They were stripped of their garments in public as an act of humiliation. They suffered and endured physical blows. Beaten with Roman lictors' rods, known as a fasces, is a bundle of wooden rods tied together with leather straps, often including an axe. It symbolized the authority and power of the magistrate they accompanied, representing both strength and the ability to administer punishment.
Their honor was trampled into the dust. In Roman society, dignity was everything, and being flogged in public was the ultimate dishonor. Then they were imprisoned without trial, even though Paul was a Roman citizen. A legal outrage.
In the night, an earthquake shook the prison, doors opened, and the jailer and his household believed. At daybreak, the magistrates tried to dismiss them quietly, but Paul demanded a public acknowledgement of their Roman citizenship.
Yet, from that dishonor, they immediately journeyed on the Via Egnatia road to Thessalonica, bruised, limping, yet proclaiming boldly.
It proves their message was not for profit or personal honor. They had already lost honor and gained scars.
It reinforces the authenticity of their bold speech under struggle. They had every reason to be silent, but instead they proclaimed louder.
So, in organic Hebrew imagery, Paul and Silas came into Thessalonica like wounded runners arriving from battle, their backs striped like a plowed field, their honor smeared in the dust of Philippi. Yet their voices rose with the unbound shout of the shepherd calling his flock.
Getting back to our imagery notes. This sets the tone. Their presence was substance, not shadow. Fullness, not hollow breath. And this connects with our notes on affliction in chapter 1, verse 6. Weight pressing down, yet endured. Struggle in Greek has the same imagery as contest or field battle. The Hebraic echo is plowing a hard field.
Verse 3. For our exhortation was not from error, nor from uncleanness, nor in deceit.
Our trumpet blast to you was not the sound of a cracked horn, nor the stench of a polluted spring, nor the sly bait of a hidden snare.
This connects with sounded out in chapter 1, verse 8, the shofar call imagery. And deceit connects with idols in chapter 1, verse 9, and lifeless trickery, unlike the living Elohim.
Verse 4. But just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the good news, so we speak, not as pleasing men, but God who tests our hearts.
We speak as men weighed on Yahweh's scales and found faithful to guard his treasure. We do not bend our words to win men's favor, but we speak before the face of Yahweh, who shines his lamp into the hidden chambers of our tents and hearts.
This refers back to faith toward God in chapter 1, verse 8, Yahweh's approval, not man's. Testing, in Greek thought, is to test, prove, or approve after examination. In the Greco-Roman world, it was often used for coins tested for authenticity, specifically for determining whether a coin was genuine or counterfeit. The emphasis is on being found worthy after scrutiny. In Hebrew imagery, testing is never abstract. It's fire, weight, trial. The dross is burned away, the inner strength revealed. Paul frames his apostolic mission not as a career granted by men's applause, but as the outcome of God's furnace test. His stripes at Philippi were part of that proving. His message is spoken from that tested, fire-forged place.
We'll pause here and continue unpacking 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 in our next chat.
If you listeners have areas of interest you'd like to explore further, questions or comments, please don't hesitate to let us know.